Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Shadowed City Podcast. This is The Shadows Within. I am your host, Larry, and I got quite a few shows to go over. And tomorrow I'll go over more. The ones that happened today, I'll review tomorrow. But these are ones that I have not gone over yet, and I need to get them out of the way. And I want to do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start with All-Star Pro pay-per-view, Guts and Glory. To kick us off was a 2-on-1 handicap match between Big Bear Bison and the Gatekeepers, where the Gatekeepers walked out victorious. The Classic Tag Team Championships by the Goldmans Open Challenge. The champions, the Goldmans, defending against a mystery team that accepted their challenge, and it was Fast and the Furies, who walked out the new champions. Hardcore Championship, Don Wildside versus the champion J-Red, where J-Red retained the gold. Classic Women's Championship, Paige Sky Smith versus the champion Reagan Anderson, with Reagan Anderson walking out the new champion. Classic Heavyweight Championship, Adam Matthews versus the champion Derek Sicario, with Adam Matthews walking out the new champion. I Quit match, Jesse Harper versus Sean Smith, with Sean Smith walking out victorious. World Tag Team Championships, the Empire of Pain versus the champions, the Killers on the Loose, with Empire of Pain walking out the new champions. Underground Championship, Lil Devil versus the champion Akane, with Lil Devil walking out the new champion. Welcome, Die Hard Hunter Ellis. What's up, brother? International Championship, Juan Sanchez versus the champion Cold Steel, with Juan Sanchez walking out the new champion. Women's World Championship, Madison Outlaw versus the champion Christine St. James, with Christine St. James retaining the gold. Hunter, I feel like you should be on most cards, brother. You're one of the greatest talents out there. Going today, brother. Keep on going. I guarantee you will travel more places. I would strongly suggest you keep doing what you're doing. I promise you, brother, you're going to go farther. I promise. World Championship match between Buster Anderson and the champion Larry Loco, with Larry Loco retaining the gold. For the Grand Prix Championship, Rob Life versus AJ Albright, with AJ Albright walking out the champion. Now for the All-Star Pro Guts and Glory briefcase, 30 women, one briefcase. And it was a Royal Rumble. Amaya Bryant, Bandita, Bailey Nelson, Dawn Wang, Emma Rose, Jackie Harper, Nina, Rockstar Glow, Sylvia Knight, Selena Blaze, Angel Bryant, Britt Graves, Callie Rage, Dirty Diana, El Jefa, Kira, Rose Wilson, Rockstar Scarlett, Sonia Ortiz, Taryn Williams, RFL, Baby Bone Crusher, KCK, Dirty Diana, HBIC Nisha, Ms. D, Rockstar Callie, Shin Joan, Suplexia, and Whitney Winters, where Selena Blaze walked out with the briefcase. Now for the men's Royal Rumble for their briefcase. Adrian Danger, Big Lou, Damian Briggs, Jaquil, J Monster, Jimmy Kane, Nagasaki, Rob Life, Shinjo, Travell Daniel, AJ Woods, Chris Legend, Frank Ortiz, Jackson Mitchell, John Robb, Kabuki Dragon, Reese the Destroyer, Rockstar Triz, Soulman Sal, Turtle Harrington, Bishop Blaze, Crimson, Jack Graves, Jay Smoke, Jay Jin, KD, Rob Anderson, Shan Leon, Terrible Tito, and Venom Lee, where Rockstar Triz walked out with the briefcase. All-Star Pro Havoc Season 4, Episode 13. Pedro Payne versus J-Red, with J-Red walking out victorious. Whitney Winters versus Dirty Diana, with Dirty Diana walking out victorious. Kabuki Dragon versus Rockstar Triz, with Rockstar Triz walking out victorious. Reese the Destroyer versus Jack Graves, with Reese the Destroyer walking out victorious. RFL versus Amaya Bryant, with Amaya Bryant walking out victorious. Travell Daniel versus Terrible Tito, with Terrible Tito walking out victorious. Jason Payne versus Damian Briggs, with Damian Briggs walking out victorious. Kira versus Christine St. James, with Kira walking out victorious. Buster Anderson versus AJ Albright, with AJ Albright walking out victorious. All-Star Pro Grindhouse Season 4, Episode 8. Don Wildside versus Venom Lee, with Venom Lee walking out victorious. El Jefa versus Sonia Ortiz, with El Jefa walking out victorious. Crimson versus K9 Kwan, with Crimson walking out victorious. Ultimo versus Granddaddy Handsome, with Ultimo walking out victorious. J Monster versus Ace Thompson, with Ace Thompson walking out victorious. Kelly Rage versus Emma Rose, with Emma Rose walking out victorious. Keith Hunt versus Blackjack, with Blackjack walking out victorious after a promo between the two. Grindhouse Championship, Rockstar Scarlett versus the champion HBIC Nisha, with HBIC Nisha retaining the gold. Grindhouse Championship, Nagasaki versus the champion Chris Legend, with Chris Legend retaining the gold. All-Star Pro Season 4 Episode 12, Noah Dixon versus Mean Mike Shields, with Mean Mike Shields walking out victorious. Don Wang versus Paige Sky Smith, with Paige Sky Smith walking out victorious. By the way, this is All-Star Pro Pile Driver Season 4 Episode 12. Welcome, Tyler. J-Rock versus Bishop Blaze, with Bishop Blaze walking out victorious. Sean Christopher versus Roy Mustang, with Roy Mustang walking out victorious. Jay Jin versus Juan Sanchez, with Jay Jin walking out victorious. Lanza Kazarian versus Lil Devil, with Lil Devil walking out victorious. Television Championship, KD versus the champion Frank Ortiz, where Frank Ortiz retained the gold. KCK versus Reagan Anderson, with KCK walking out victorious. Adrian Danger versus Adam Matthews, with Adrian Danger walking out victorious. Now for ASW. Oh, so good. Corey Bishop versus Max Steel, with Max Steel walking out victorious. Big Swole versus David Pope, with Big Swole walking out victorious. OG Bishop Freeman versus Akoni, with Akoni walking out victorious. Four-way elimination, Talos versus the Problem One versus Dominic Davino versus Seven Winters, with Talos walking out victorious. ASW Championships, Sicko versus the champion Mr. Cause, with Mr. Cause retaining the gold. 2 out of 3, no weapons, Jesse Justice versus Angel Bryant, with Angel Bryant walking out victorious. ASW T3, 2 out of 3, Todd Wilson versus Nagasaki versus Dimebag Dan, with Nagasaki walking out victorious. Six-way elimination, Amaya Bryant, AJ Michelle versus HBIC Nisha versus Winter Storm versus Nikita Sakamoto versus Angelina Angelo, with Winter Storm walking out victorious. Four-way elimination, Mr. Bones versus Grimlord versus Draven Kane versus Jay Smoke, with Jay Smoke walking out with the 420 Hardcore Championship. Welcome, Shan Leon, known as Buster Anderson. I will be reviewing your show from today tomorrow. Great show today, by the way. Steel Cage, Dimebag Dan versus Nagasaki versus Todd Wilson, with Dimebag Dan walking out victorious in a steel cage. Now for the next ASW show, welcome James Marino. Welcome Underdog Hero. I'm going over your shows right now. What's up, everybody? ASW 2 out of 3. Fuck Big Back Buster. Oh shit. ASW 2 out of 3, Mod Majors versus Blue versus TA Magnum, with Blue walking out victorious. Light Tubes and Thumbtacks, 2 out of 3, Michael Russell versus Jaquil, with Jaquil walking out victorious. TLC 420 Hardcore Championship, Marcus Banks versus King RP versus Jay Smoke versus Ace Malenko versus Jay Blaze versus OG Bishop Freeman, with Ace Malenko walking out victorious. Hell yeah, brothers. Good to have you here. Underdog Hero, you up. Oh, huge back bet. Damn, they're going off in the chat between each other. Not the first time we're going to have a potential match here, ladies and gentlemen, because they've already faced before, but they've had, I think, a few battles now that I'm recalling. So another one in their mini down the line. You never know. ASW rules, Victoria Ritchie versus Kenzie McVeigh, with Victoria Ritchie walking out victorious. 2 out of 3, no weapons, Jay Prince versus Nagasaki, with Nagasaki walking out victorious. Men's No Man Lands. Oh, Shan Leons, you want to go, boy, says, ooh, Underdog Hero. Man's No Man Lands Championship in an underground, which is their version called No Man's Land. The Dream versus the champion Jay Money, with Dream walking out victorious. Winner gets snacks and cakes and shit. Oh man, that actually sounds pretty good right now. I'll be drinking after this show, so I'll be getting drunk. The next ASW show, 8-way elimination. Cyborg Jackie versus Erica RP versus Madison Outlaw versus Isabella Steele versus Dynamite Daisy versus Josie Marie Jane versus Jay Prince versus Emily Wright, with Emily Wright walking out victorious. Gauntlet Eliminator 10-man. Killian Bain versus Billy Barber versus Garmar versus Jackson Wright versus the villain Todd Wilson versus Inkslinger versus Dimebag Dan versus the Savage John Robb versus Lil Del versus Tyson Storm, with John Robb walking out victorious. Oh, most definitely, brother. Always drink to get drunk. I don't just drink to sip on it. When I drink to get drunk. Booyah. The next ASW show, and the last one I have on here currently. Nagasaki versus Dimebag Dan, with Nagasaki walking out victorious. Miko Nakatoshi, I think is how you say it, versus Nikita Sakamoto, with Nikita Sakamoto walking out victorious. Alu Wilson versus Sicko in an ASW Rules, with Sicko walking out victorious. ASW Rules Ladders Only. Big Time versus Noah Butler, with Noah Butler walking out victorious. 4-way elimination. Big Bertha versus Madam Moon versus Veronica LeBeau versus Erica RP, with Erica RP walking out victorious. No Man's Land Underground, which is the No Man's Land match. 2 out of 3. The one Tyson Storm versus King RP, with King RP walking out victorious. OG Bishop Freeman versus Damian Briggs, with Damian Briggs walking out victorious. Dimebag Dan versus Psycho, with Dimebag Dan walking out victorious. And in the main event, Jay Finesse versus Jay Smoke versus Todd Wilson, with Todd Wilson walking out victorious. Sorry about that, y'all. John Robb will go one-on-one with Damian Briggs for the vacant ASW King of Kings Championship. It's going to be a banger, most definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, we got an announcement from here, from the boss man of ASW. Go check that out. Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is for EFED shows right now. I will also be going over the shows that happened today, tomorrow, and coming soon. I will be going over what wrestling shows are coming up from the ones I do have promoted in the past, so and help throw out their stuff for them. So stay tuned for that. But right here, you heard it for ASW. Got a big banger coming up. Stay tuned. Now for TXT Imperium, who also had a great pay-per-view today, which I will go over tomorrow. 6-way elimination. Trey Young versus Pumpkin Jack versus Wildside versus Tyler Jones versus Granddaddy Handsome versus El Muerto, with Tyler Jones walking out victorious. 4-way Extreme Rules. The Gremlin versus Teo Malenko versus Sean Smith versus Killian Bain, with the Gremlin walking out victorious. TXT Realm 10, which is their Gauntlet Eliminator match. Bunny Black versus Jocelyn versus Nikita Sakamoto versus Reagan Anderson versus Veronica LeBeau versus Cyborg Jackie versus Jules Wigginton versus Obsidian Vex versus First Lady versus Winter Storm, with the First Lady walking out victorious. 3-way, 2 out of 3 Extreme Rules. Andre Robinson versus Jackson Wright versus Cold Steel, with Cold Steel walking out victorious. 4-way Extreme Rules. McKay Albright versus Young G versus Emma Rose versus Eve Steele, with Young G walking out victorious. 3-way elimination. Crazy Fox versus Callie Rage versus Amaya Bryant, with Callie Rage walking out victorious. TXT Realm 10. Oconee versus David Pope versus Jay Money versus Midway Boy versus The Problem One versus Billy Barber versus Fly Guy versus Michael Russell versus Primetime Jojo versus Talos, with Oconee walking out victorious. 3-way elimination. Haiku versus Haley Ramone versus AJ Michelle, with AJ Michelle walking out victorious in the main event of that night. 3-way, 2 out of 3 Extreme Rules. Savage Vega versus Inkslinger versus Grimlord, with Inkslinger walking out victorious. TXT Run the Ones. Extreme Rules RVD versus Emily Wright, with RVD walking out victorious. Extreme Rules Ventura Onyx versus Jay Prince, with Ventura Onyx walking out victorious. Extreme Rules The Villain Todd Wilson versus Lil Devil, with Lil Devil walking out victorious. Welcome, Tabitha. Extreme Rules, Johnny Spears versus Dream Do, with Dream Do walking out victorious. 2 out of 3 Extreme Rules, Gemma Lee Star versus Artemis that was a 1-1, with Gemma Lee Star walking out victorious. 2 out of 3 Extreme Rules, Jay Smoke versus the badass John Wigginton, with John Wigginton walking out victorious. 2 out of 3 Extreme Rules, Angel Bryant versus Riley the Ripper, with Riley the Ripper walking out victorious. 2 out of 3 Extreme Rules, Marcus Watts versus Dimebag Dan, with Dimebag Dan walking out victorious. 2 out of 3 Hell in a Cell versus SGK and Oconee, with Oconee walking out victorious in that main event. Now for the next TXT show, which is TXT Intake, a 30-man Royal Rumble. A-Dot, Afterburn, Brock Carter, Foxbit, Jay Prince, Judah Kane, Killian Bain, Michael Russell, Alu Wilson, SGK, Adrian Danger, Buster Anderson, Crazy Larry, Fly Guy, Johnny Spears, Jay Jin, Marcus Watts, Midway Boy, Pat G, Swerve Strickland, AJ Albright, Big Reese, Dominic Davino, Jay Money, The Savage John Robb, King, Max Steel, Mr. Kaz, Sean Smith, and Talos. The next which was won by Jay Prince. The next matchup, King RP versus Swole Dinero, with Swole Dinero walking out victorious. TXT Gladiator Championship, 2 out of 3 Extreme Rules, Buster Anderson versus the champion Psycho, with Buster Anderson walking out the new champion. 4-way Extreme Rules, RVD versus Zoe 7 versus Paige Sky Smith versus Violet Death, with RVD walking out victorious. Now, next up, these matches are 3v3s. 3v3, 2 out of 3, big time. Billy Barber and Damian Briggs versus Joshua Shade, Andre Robinson, and The Problem One, with Andre Robinson, The Problem One, and Joshua Shade walking out victorious. Hell in a Cell 3v3. Haiku versus Kailana Wilson Haiku, Kailana Wilson, and Angel Bryant versus Amaya Bryant, Haley Ramone, and HBIC Nisha, with Haley Ramone, Amaya Bryant, and HBIC Nisha walking out victorious. The 3v3 elimination, JoJo, Savage Vega, and Grimlord versus Jackson Wright, Todd Wilson, and David Pope, with Primetime JoJo, Savage Vega, and Grimlord walking out victorious. 4-way Extreme Rules, Cali Rage versus Lico Lions versus Dynamite Daisy versus AJ Michelle, with Cali Rage walking out victorious. And in the main event, 5-way Extreme Rules, Ink Slinger versus Tyson Storm versus Alex Knight versus Cold Steel versus the Phantom, Eddie Walker. My bad. It was not for a title, and he was not a champion right now. With Cold Steel walking out victorious. Now for GPW Dark Extra. A brawl backstage between Rob Anderson and Jack Graves, where Jack Graves walked out victorious. 3-way elimination, Alpha versus Bobo the Clown versus Tim Nightshade, with Alpha walking out victorious. Chanel Baltimore versus Jeannie Jaw, with Chanel Baltimore walking out victorious. Mr. Hot Sauce versus the Southern Psycho, with the Southern Psycho walking out victorious. Craig Mack versus Buster Anderson, with Buster Anderson walking out victorious. Ranger Rogue versus Blade, with Blade walking out victorious. Iceman versus Jersey, with Iceman walking out victorious. The Tank versus Outlaw, with Outlaw walking out victorious. Michael Link McIntyre versus Dimebag Dan, with Dimebag Dan walking out victorious. John Robb versus Ari Veger, with John Robb walking out victorious. Abby Small versus Valeska Ball, with Valeska Ball walking out victorious. Sylvia Knight versus Nikita, with Sylvia Knight walking out victorious. War Maiden versus Jinx LaFay, with Jinx LaFay walking out victorious. Yoko Sakoa versus Big Lou, with Yoko Sakoa walking out victorious. Now for the GPW Universe show. Jersey versus Dimebag Dan, with Dimebag Dan walking out victorious. Special guest referee match being Tiny D for the handicap match 2-on-1. X versus Grave Nightmare and Lost Lamb, with Grave Nightmare and Lost Lamb walking out victorious. Hoops versus Windy Rogue, with Windy Rogue walking out victorious. KO 4-way, BLK versus Mr. Hot Sauce versus Michael Link McIntyre versus Suzuki Cho, with Michael Link McIntyre walking out victorious. GCW North American Championship held in the HOH cage. Buster Anderson versus Outlaw with Buster Anderson walking out the champion. Jay Williams versus Big Al versus Muerte El Guapo with Muerte El Guapo walking out victorious. GPW Women's Intercontinental Championship, Akira versus Reagan Anderson with Akira walking out victorious. HOH Ultra-Violent Championship, HOH 2 out of 3 Tank versus Big Lou with Tank walking out victorious. HOH Heavyweight Championship, Jack Graves versus Ranger Zero with Jack Graves walking out victorious. And in the main event, the One Championship, King Slick versus Trey Nolan with Trey Nolan walking out victorious. Now for GPW HOH Showcase. Sylvia Knight versus Amelia Jones Skull with Sylvia Knight walking out victorious. The Skull Syndicate, Sam and Jack Skull versus Jack Graves and Blade of the Red Wolves with the Skull Syndicate walking out victorious. No Holds Barred, Brick Graves versus War Maiden with Brick Graves walking out victorious. HOH Mid-Atlantic Championship, the champion Amber Sky Schmitz versus Scarlett Silver with Amber Sky Schmitz walking out and retaining the gold. Tables match, Jay La Basita versus the Demon with the Demon walking out victorious. Tornado tag, Yoko Sikoa and Makeo versus Bobo the Clown and Shade with Yoko Sikoa and Makeo walking out victorious. 8-man gauntlet eliminator, Gang Mac versus Shane GM versus Big Lou versus GM Hank Hancock versus John Robb versus Ringmaster versus Ryan GM versus Jack Grace for the Money Millionaire Championship, where Ryan GM walked out the champion. Hell in a Cell X versus Alexander Galloway with Alexander Galloway walking out victorious, and in the main event, One Championship held under the One Rules, Tyson Storm versus Trey Nolan with Tyson Storm walking out the champion. Now for NCPW, North Carolina Pro Wrestling. NCPW Carnage. Akane versus AJ Woods with Akane walking out victorious. Royal Geniuses versus the Red Reapers with Royal Geniuses walking out victorious. There was an 8-way ladies match which Paige Sky Smith won. Jack Graves versus Venom Lee with Venom Lee walking out victorious. Big Lou versus Chaotic Demon versus the Phantom Eddie Walker with the Chaotic Demon walking out victorious. Nomad versus Alexander Colt with Alexander Colt walking out victorious. Muerte El Guapo versus Alex King versus Buster Anderson with Alex King walking out victorious. Tony Rose versus Blade with Blade walking out victorious. Jack Graves versus Rob Anderson with Jack Graves walking out victorious. Champion versus champion match. NCPW Beatdown, the Daughters of Decay, Kendra and Violet Grimm versus Sarah Simpson and Olivia Madison with the Daughters of Decay walking out victorious. Reese the Destroyer versus Jack Graves, the champion, for the BMF Championship, where Reese the Destroyer walked out the new champion. Buster Anderson versus Travell Daniel in an Underground, with Travell Daniel walking out victorious. Luther Cross versus Venom Lee versus Jaquil with Venom Lee walking out victorious. Rob Anderson and Sean Smith versus the Royal Geniuses with Royal Geniuses walking out victorious. Artemis versus Angelina versus Taryn Williams went down in a contest because it kind of like ended. If you guys go back and watch, you'll understand what I mean. Now for WCCW shows. Man, we're almost there, ladies and gentlemen. For the first one for WCCW, Mother Russia versus Little Russia, with Mother Russia walking out victorious. Hell in a Cell, Nova Penny Shields versus Queen Scarlet, with Queen Scarlet walking out victorious. Inferno match, Monarch Calypso versus CJ Frost, with Monarch Calypso walking out victorious. Cora Desmo versus Eric Knight, with Eric Knight walking out in an ambulance match. Tornado tag, Mandy Jane Kelly Lee and Justin Edward Lee versus CJ Frost and Kaiba Frost, with Team Frost walking out victorious. TD versus SKG, with TD walking out victorious. Welcome, Koei. I'm almost done with this, brother, and then I'll call you back. WCCW's next show, No Holds Barred, Tanaka Tawiqua versus Akua, with Tanaka Tawiqua walking out victorious. No Holds Barred, Big Unk versus Wu Ye, with Big Unk walking out victorious. XPWF Made It Famous match. Carrick versus Little Russia, with Carrick walking out victorious. No Holds Barred, Shadow versus Eric Knight, with Shadow walking out victorious. Welcome, Marcus. Welcome. XPWF Made It Famous. Dirty Diana versus BK the Body, with Dirty Diana walking out victorious. XPWF Made It Famous, Hannah Hannibal versus Victoria Payne, with Hannah Hannibal walking out victorious. Jay Vega versus the Dog, Rob Anderson, with Jay Vega walking out victorious. Soulbreaker Dawn versus Danny Marcella and Manifestation, with Soulbreaker Dawn teaming up with her partner again, where Dawn and Manifestation walked out victorious. Joe Fox versus TD, with TD walking out victorious. Now for the next WCCW show. WCCW All-Americans Championship. Gabrielle Salas versus the champion Tara Moss, with Gabrielle Salas walking out the new champion. WCCW Sin City's Divas Championship. Mandy Jane Kelly versus the champion SKG, with SKG retaining the gold. WCCW Men's Hardcore Championship. David Dyer Wolf Pope versus the champion El Vipiro, with El Vipiro retaining the gold. WCCW Iron Men's Nations Championship. Outsider versus the champion Cora Desmo retaining the gold. WCCW Iron Women's Nations Championship Falls Count Anywhere Fatal 4-Way, where Malika Killings walked out victorious. XPWF Made It Famous. WCCW 12th World Heavyweight Championship. Nikita Evans versus the champion LJ Rocks, with Nikita Evans walking out the new champion. For the men's WCCW 12th World Heavyweight Championship, Eric Knight versus the champion Travis Turner, where Eric Knight walked out the new champion. WCCW Undisputed National Women's Championship, Big Fran versus the champion Nova Penny Shields, with Big Fran walking out the new champion. WCCW Undisputed National Men's Championship, TD versus the champion Monarch Calypso, with Monarch Calypso retaining the gold. Now for the European Championship for the Men's Royal Rumble. Ali Nasir Mohammed, Big Reese, CJ Frost, Giovanni, Jay Vega, Joe Fox, Old Man, aka The Real, Shadow, Travis Turner, Violent J, Baron Kromke, Big Unk, David Dyer Pope Wolf, John Connor, Cora Desmo, Nikolai Romanova, if I said that right, JoJo, Stevie D'Angelo, Outsider, Walter Reeves, B. Moore, Carlos Guerrero, Gar, Justin Edward Lee, Lenny Payne, Jord G, Rob Anderson, TD, Uwakari, Zan, where Stevie D'Angelo walked out for champion. Now for the Women's European Championship held under their Royal Rumble. Alexia Cole, Becca, Carolyn Cannon, Lauren Castronova, Montana Red, Nixia Payne, Queen Scarlet Shields, Soulbreaker Dawn, Svetlana Vodroska, Victoria Payne, Akua, Bellatrix Countess, Dirty Diana, Little Russia, Megan J. Kelly, Pamela P. Platinum, Raina Blackwell, Stacy, Tina Rose, Yumi Kawangyang, Ariel Dagusa, Callie Red, Daria K, Mitsuri, Nikita Evans, Phoebe Destruction, SKG, Summer, Tara Moss, and Yuri Laney, where Yuri Laney walked out victorious. Oh man, so good. Ladies and gentlemen, we are through it. Tomorrow I will go over more. We're going to be returning with Anarchy Archives tomorrow. Stay tuned for a War Room coming up. And go check out the draft for IWA if you haven't. And I will be going over eventual wrestling shows coming up. So pro wrestling show, because this was eFed wrestling shows. But I will be going over pro wrestling shows that are coming up in the future at some point in time. But in the meantime, I'm going to go get drunk. Everybody have a great day. Good night. Good morning. Good evening. Good afternoon. Wherever y'all may be. Peace out.